Hey, hi everybody. Welcome to Monica Richardson's podcast. As we begin to move into a new phase of what I do with videos, I will be interviewing many experts in the field of problematic drug and alcohol use and newer solutions than we've seen for the last 80 years. And a lot of them have been around for, a good 20, 30 years. So here we go. And we're going to bring on our guest today. One thing I wanted to say, please, if you can subscribe, we're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers and share everywhere, but mostly that I need that 1,000 and then I can start to change what I do here. And let's bring on everybody. And we have Michelle Dunbar coming on. We are connecting. Hello there.
Hey, how are you?
Hi.
Hey, we did it.
We did it. How are you?
I'm good. Now that I swam, I'm better.
Yes, of course. I totally get it.
How are
Couldn't walk
you?
today. We're good.
we're
We're
good.
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 Can you
So-
hear us good?
What's that?
Can you hear us good?
Yeah, it's a little, even mine is,
How about now?
yeah, that's better.
Okay,
Oh,
I've turned
okay.
the gain.
Okay.
All right. Can you make us big, Michelle, on the screen?
Oh, yeah.
Just macro it.
Are you little there?
Oh,
All
yeah,
right,
that's
there we
better. That's
go.
better.
Okay, can we start with you guys each, introducing yourselves and just give a quick, just who you are and what do you do?
Sure. Well, my name is Mark Sheeren, and Michelle and I and Stephen Slate wrote the Freedom Model for Addictions. And I started basically the first non-12-step model of helping people with addictions back in 92.
Well,
First,
90 really.
yeah, 89 really is when it started. But I don't think I came up with the moniker non-12-step until 92, 91, 92.
Yeah.
And so we've helped 25,000 people move past addictions, and we do it without telling people they need meetings, recovery, perpetual therapies, all that stuff goes out the window, and we show people how to move on with their lives after they've solved their addiction.
Great.
That's my sort of claim to fame.
Yep.
Yes. And Michelle?
I am Michelle Dunbar, and I solved my problem in 1990, and I was part of the original research project that founded the Freedom Model, along with Mark, and actually was with my dad initially, before I kind of came around. So my dad has since retired, and I picked up the torch, and I've been working with Mark ever since.
Yeah. So we've been working together for 30 years or I don't know, 32 years. Long time.
Long time.
Wow.
Long time.
You guys were young when you started, huh?
We were children.
Yeah.
So how old were you when that's 30, you were in your 20s?
I was 22.
Yeah.
When I met Mark was 19.
Yeah, I was
wow.
19. Yeah. That's when
Wow.
I went through treatment for 18 months, and I said, this is just crazy what I'm learning.
Mhm.
And
He didn't have a license. His license had been suspended. So that's when I met you. You didn't have a driver's license.
yeah, I was basically homeless, Michelle. Thanks.
You were.
Okay, so let's just jump right in with crazy. What was crazy? So you actually saw some things like right away that seemed crazy to you. And so what was some of that stuff?
Well, I think first of all, the audience needs to know I was mandated to treatment for a year because I had almost killed some people drunk driving. And at that point in my life, I was also indoctrinated in AA because I came from an AA family. My mother was a certified alcoholism counselor. My sister ran a therapeutic community.
Wow.
Several of my siblings were in rehabs and had failed. And basically my whole existence was wrapped up in the cult of AA. And I was being smuggled into halfway houses when my mom would work weekends, and I would be pulled into these halfway houses because she would have me on the weekends because my parents were divorced.
Wow.
And that as a child, 7 to 11, being peddled into rehabs and having that part of my social life was totally screwed up.
Wow.
And so I knew nothing but treatment. Other kids were like, I played baseball. I went to dance, and I was like, I had to lie because I was in rehabs or visiting
Wow,
siblings
that's
at rehabs.
sad.
And yeah, it was just really, really fucked up. I mean, I'm just going to be blatant about it. So, but it gave me a really good understanding of the industry because I can remember my mom coming back from one of her jobs, and I was at her house at the time. And she's like, I'm just tired of cleaning up the suicides, the blood and the mess. And I was like, this is,
wow.
And so all this information is filtering to me, but yet my mom stayed in AA and was touting it
Her
as
whole
the
life.
solution her whole life.
Yeah.
And yet, so there was this big, weird discrepancy between reality and what she was sucked into, and so that was my background. And then I had a problem because they prophesied that I would have a problem. And then I did, of course,
Right.
I fulfilled the prophecy, and I could never drink or drug like everybody else. I always had guilt. I always knew that I was an alcoholic. I was pulled into that whole world. And then when I went to treatment to get my license back and my freedom, because I was looking at jail time, I had to go to this mental hospital. And I remember thinking,
wow,
why am I here?
Wow.
Every day I got to go in, they slam that weird door behind you, and I'm in group therapy all day. And I remember I asked the counselor, how is my disease like cancer? Because when I was a kid, I had the beginnings of cancer, and they cut out a bunch of my mouth and everything. And she said, well, Mr. Sheeren, you're being non-compliant. And I said, no, I'm asking a question.
Wow.
And that's when I realized, first of all, that I had some street smarts, and I also knew she didn't have an answer.
Yeah.
And that's when it all started to take shape. I was like, oh my God, this is a cult. I don't think I could articulate that.
Yeah.
And then they kept me, instead of a year, because I wouldn't comply, they kept me for 18 months, and they broke me. They worked on me so hard that I started to rewrite my own history.
Wow.
And then when I finally succumbed to their propaganda and indoctrination, I said, yes, I'm an alcoholic. I finally gave in. I was like, yes, I'm an alcoholic.
Which he had to do to get his driver's license back.
Yeah. To get out.
Yeah.
It was like I was institutionalized now. And I really started to believe this stuff. And I was so broken by it. I went back to my mom's house, and I was going to shoot myself. And that's when the freedom model started. I had a moment of clarity, and I met Jerry, her father, that night. And I told him what had happened, and he said, well, that's all crazy shit, and then that's where it all started. And I met Michelle. So that's my story.
but thank you, Mark, for sharing all that. And, I've known a lot of your background now, but I didn't know like that. And that would explain maybe why you're so driven and why you were so driven to be dragged to rehabs over the weekend. When I was 7 and 9, oh my God, that didn't happen to me. And then at night, I had freedom, and I chose to go stupidly, but that's so harsh. Really, really, really harsh. I'm really sorry. I thought, as I was getting ready for this, realizing about the abusive teen industry.
Yeah.
That I'm gonna, and I want to hear from you, Michelle, if you want to piggyback more on what he just said and shared, but that this whole thing that's happened with the vow, and how, and if anybody out there is listening, so the vow is an HBO series that has exposed NXIUM, a cult that was created by Keith Raniere and Nancy Silverman, I think, because I forget her last name. But so we got 120 years in prison. But what I see happening, we have a ton of people joining the Facebook groups by watching it, right? And I don't know if you have other people contacting you as they were when watching this. So the New York Times reported it, and that, it just kind of has this big, like a large platform, right? Mainstream media covered it because it was so, a sex cult and all this. But what's so different is that in Scientology, when they all leave, what happens? They're all feared to death, and they can't do this. But Mark Vincente and Nippy and his wife, Sarah, they have their old, it's a little bit culty podcast. And there is this huge, what's it called? It's like it's like this bubbling over of people who are not afraid. They're embarrassed, but yeah, they already exposed it. But we've had a lot of other, and in AA, how long that I'm going to finally create a Zoom. We have like 20 people that signed up that said, we're going to do a Zoom like this, recorded, and people are just going to talk about the evils and what happened to them, right?
Yeah.
You know, I think that by me doing this and then interviewing everybody I ever met that I love that is in my film or wasn't, that we just start dumping it on YouTube so that it can get a higher profile. So Michelle, you're smiling big. What do you want to say?
No, I think that's all very exciting. I mean, I've started thinking about, like, we're on TikTok now, and we continuously get AA people because we stepped out of the fray for a long time where we weren't saying anything about AA. We were letting sleeping dogs lie, so to speak.
Right.
And then we realized, you know, when we get people here, so many of them have been so damaged by AA, and I was damaged by AA. He was damaged by AA, you know, that I'm like, we're doing a grave disservice to people by not telling the truth about AA. So we started doing that again. And then you get people that are like, I mean, some of the things that they say, I feel for them. I mean, even the people that are totally nasty, super nasty.
It's because they're terrified.
They're so scared
to
hear the truth. And I think I have to remind myself consistently, these are victims. These are victims that have been sucked into a cult, and they're so heavily indoctrinated that they're willing to kind of make fools of themselves when it comes right down to it, you know, by you know, coming out here on social media and attacking us. And but that's, I mean, Mark's story, I had the same story. I was in AA meetings as a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old. And, you know, with strange men.
Oh God.
I mean,
God.
it just,
the babysitter.
I babysat for this guy, and he was so inappropriate. And then when I went to AA myself, and I was 22, don't you know, that guy ended up coming up to me at smoke break, hitting on me hardcore. And I'm like, are you shitting me, dude?
Were you able to fight him off? I mean, where were you at psychologically? Were you?
I left the meeting.
Oh, good.
When he came up to me to talk to me, he was like, oh, what are you doing here? And I'm already horrified enough that I'm at a meeting for myself. And I'm like, what the hell do you think I'm doing here? And I'm like, but I'm not staying. And he's like, oh, no, maybe we can go. I'm like, bye. I left. I was like, I avoided that guy. If I saw him at a meeting, I left the meeting. Or I went with
just
these
to put
guys.
it in perspective, he was probably 50 and you were 22.
I was 22. Yeah. Well, I was when I was babysitting for him, I was 12, and he would like be the one to drive me. I babysat for him every Friday night for a while.
For his children, he had kids.
He had kids with his wife. By the time I got to AA myself, it was like 10 years later, and he was divorced. Go figure. And he was just coming back.
Just coming back.
He was coming back. So both of you had that, you know, that really deep, maybe like Leah Remini, who was brought there as a child, and you know, some others that we know as Scientology and these other religions. The other thing I see too is that there's people from some big religions that have decided we're done, and so they have podcasts, and look, they have a lot of followers.
Wow.
I think it's a Jehovah's Witness. One of them asked me to be interviewed on his show, so I was like, yeah, sure, and then I could interview him, whatever. But so this brings me to maybe the first one of a couple that I'd like to do about that popped into my head. How can these people, when I was watching Mark, did you watch The Vow? Have you guys both seen it?
I haven't, no.
No, but I
have
want to watch
HBO.
it.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
I don't have it, but I'll find a way to get it.
Man, you got to watch it for homework, but it's really good. But you know, there's a big payoff because he does get prison time of 120 years. So there's a lot of vindication, a lot of justice that feels like it's done. But there's something about it. And I'm watching it going, look at how these really bright, smart people with actually no substance issue dragging them in. This whole fucking human potential bullshit movement where we have to work on ourselves. Where'd it come from? And
Right.
it was before Scientology. It's before EST. What was it? So then, and we can talk about this, AA, the family. So maybe I'll interview the guy who wrote the book, The Family. He's a journalist. And then the Oxford movements. So I'm going to turn it over to both of you. We can have a conversation, but I think you might know a little more than me. But I do think that it layered this layer in American society, in government everywhere, as you and I all know. And maybe for people who don't, let's touch on all the different places that it is, who gets forced there, who gets sent. Look, you were sent there how many years ago? That this was the beginning of why people jumped into cults so easily. So go ahead.
Well, yeah. I think people have to understand that the advent of modern psychology and the temperance movement, which is, against drinking, right? The governmental against drinking, prohibition. So you have the temperance movement, you have prohibition, you had the Industrial Revolution, you had the first century Christian tent revival meetings, and the advent of psychology, all coming on the scene from the late 1800s to the 1920s. So you have this massive conversion of talking about the mind, talking about power, talking about powerlessness, and a very perverted version of Christianity being all coalesced with this one fella, Bill Wilson, who figured out, I can make money at this. Nobody had ever made money besides the Catholic Church throughout history, of course, right? Because they were part of the government and the Church of England and all that. But nobody had ever made money at a problem, making a problem, creating a problem out of thin air, or leveraging a problem like Bill did. Bill figured it out. If you read the book Pass It On, you'll see that he had an idea of having a multi-layered hospital. And it was basically, detox was an indoctrination scenario with sponsorship. Now, what sponsorship in AA started out as was you would go into a detox bed. You were this hopeless guy like myself, right? All drunk and miserable. Your marriage is on the rocks. You're just
lost your job.
Yeah. Your life is a shit show, right? And then somebody shows up, an AA member in good standing, who has surrendered his or her life to the cult, walks in and says, you now have to surrender. So they had developed what was called ego deflation at depth. Basically, we got to make the person believe that they are completely fucking hopeless. Okay. Our job in the next 2 days, while he's in this vulnerable state, is to make him feel that he has no way.
Ego deflation depth. I like that. I don't like it, but what they do.
That's what they called it. That was Dr. Silkworth, Bill, and all the sponsorship, the supposed 100 men and women that got sober that never existed, by the way. So this little band of people, these religious zealots, these wackos, Bill and his henchmen, would sit this person down, tell him ego deflation at depth, and you need the Lord. You got to get on your knees and surrender your will and your life over to AA and to God, this version of God. And if you don't, you will die a drunken fool. Jails, institutions, or death. So they would terrify people. And Bill would say things like, listen, if you don't do God's will here, John Barleycorn will make you do it, meaning booze. So he created the straw man of addiction. Right? This nebulous force outside of you that's going to attack you, the demon spirit of booze, right? Demon rum. And then he wielded that and said, you now have to believe God the way I do. I had this spiritual experience. I had the white light flash experience. I'm the prophet. So that was stage one. Now, if you didn't, you had to be sponsored in. That's where the word sponsor comes from.
Yeah, they didn't want just anybody in. They didn't let just anybody in. Yeah,
right. You had to surrender to the cult.
Yeah.
So if you surrendered adequately, you were sponsored in, and then that sponsor, that person that was doing this ritual on you, said you're allowed in. Then you were in. Then they said only an alcoholic can work with another alcoholic, which is bullshit. And then your job to stay sober is to bring the next guy in. It's the Jehovah's Witness model. Okay? It's identical. It's
really, really, is it?
Yeah, it's totally the same. It's a numbers game. And it was the first pyramid scheme. So Bill talked about pyramiding. He's the one that came
Yeah.
up with the term pyramid scheme. So
Wow.
so that's how the first stage was. The next was a rehabilitation wing. And then what we now consider halfway houses would be the third wing in the hospital. But what happened was none of it really worked because nobody was staying sober.
Yeah.
So Bill had to farm out the crazy to the rehabilitation industry, but he didn't figure that part out for about 15 years. He really tried to make his model work, but people were dying. There were people getting shot. There's all kinds of crazy shit going on. And he was like, this isn't working. So I need to farm out the crazy and just indoctrinate people into my meeting structure and create a corporate structure that can never come back on AA World Services, but have the money flow to it. So if I go through all that in our program, I have a deprogramming series of seminars I give. I go through the numbers. I go through everything in our online program.
Financials.
Oh yeah, let's just tell everybody as they're listening, and I can put this down in the notes below on YouTube. So everybody here, Michelle and Mark, it was during COVID, decided to do a whole series of lessons. Right, you did every chapter. Over a month, and you put they're still all up there, right? Are your videos?
We actually redid it in 21 and like cut it down into little bite-sized chunks. And so it's in the Freedom Model online program now.
Okay, so you have shorter things, but don't forget now, this is a thing that I learned over the past 6 years. When I first started, the people around me be like, oh, nobody's going to watch all that. Everything has to be under 3 minutes. And then here people are watching like Tim Pool for 2.5 hours or Russell Brand his are shorter. But, people are sitting watching Joe Rogan for 2 hours.
I know.
Whoever. So it's an interesting thing that happened over COVID. People are like, yeah, I think TV sucks and your news sucks. So we're going to watch people on YouTube for an hour and a half. Like the other day I did it. I was like, I can't believe I just watched that person for that long. And it was totally intriguing. So, it's so good to know the Freedom Model. If that's what your channel is called, the Freedom Model?
The Freedom Model YouTube channel. Yeah. And so we do have longer videos too.
Yeah.
And we have our podcast. We have the Addiction Solution
which is
podcast.
30 minutes typically.
Which has 150 some odd episodes, and that has taken off like a rocket ship. So this AA stuff, we have a whole series on the podcast as well. So we have the online program that you can buy that is massively comprehensive. We're talking 65 videos, workbooks, everything to deprogram. It's all about somebody like myself that's completely indoctrinated, or who's gone to treatment and is indoctrinated light. That can be really dangerous. If you're halfway in, halfway out, you can wallow in that and waste 30 years of your life wondering, why don't I feel normal? And that's sad to me. That's super
really sad. Yeah, I'm glad you guys did all that. So, a couple of things that you talked about, which as I was getting ready for this over many days, started to think about the temperance movement, which Gabrielle Glaser, when she wrote her book, did a lot of investigating of early drinking in 1890 through when AA was started. But you have to imagine if it says it started in 35, we know things were happening before then. But I've watched enough of like some shows that talked about what was going on in early America. And what did this temperance movement attach the vote on to that? They used that, like something happened recently, which I won't get political, where they attached this one thing that everybody was going to run out and vote about to another thing, right? And it made things go crazy. Well, with the temperance movement, I think after we talk about this, that there could be someone I might interview about the early history, but it would make sense because they were fucking nuts. They were nuts. And it was not a good idea. If you think about the Spanish flu ended, and you're going to stop the sale of alcohol in America right then when people were probably just.
Yeah, well, the temperance movement was pushed by women, by a women's society who were, for the first time in American history, men were drinking at bars. You have to remember, as we industrialized, they're working in factories. So all of a sudden, Tom, your husband, was at the bar. That never happened. We drank with our families right through the 1800s, 1700s, 1800s. So with the advent of the Industrial Revolution, all of a sudden husbands are now out and about for the first time in history. The women
didn't have to be home on the farm.
That's
well, but
exactly
the
right.
smaller places. So Gabrielle said that it was different in smaller towns. Children were
Yes.
allowed in the taverns
Mhm.
because that was the only place in the town. The children were actually given beer until there was clean water. So they
Yep.
drank very diluted beer.
Yep.
And the whole family went, which is never depicted in Hollywood Westerns.
That's
That
right.
actually there were
That's
women
right.
and children. It's so funny, not just men and whores. There were women and children
Yes.
Exactly
in the
right.
fucking taverns, right?
That's it. That's
Maybe
it.
we'll make a real movie someday about the truth about the Western. But anyway, it's crazy to think about this. So getting back to that, it was the first cult. And so let's talk about, some of the one-liners and the things about the ideology that make a cult. And we just go around and around and talk about it, and then go to the next level of how deep it is. So let's start with either one of you. What are some of the things you're told that make it a cult?
I think the very
Powerless.
yeah, there it is.
I mean, the whole first step, I remember being told that you have to take the first step. You have to take the first step.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
admit that you're powerless over alcohol. And on its face for me, even though I'd grown up in AA, when it was me,
Yeah.
it didn't resonate well with me. I didn't understand it. I'm like, what does this really mean? I
Yeah.
am just not somebody that can just be like, okay, I'm going through the motions. I've never been that person, And so just the idea that, and then when you get to step 2, when it started getting into the steps where I realized, oh, this is about God. This is about taking on a belief in God, which I was raised Catholic. So that wasn't a huge stretch for me, even though at that point in my life, I still couldn't wrap my head around the idea that God cared whether or not I drank.
Yeah.
And you know what else too, Michelle, about that? As I was leaving, I remember this voice, because I was raised Catholic too, this voice started coming in and said, we are given free will, which is why Catholicism actually grew really big.
That's right.
You had free will. You get to choose whether you're going to steal or you're going to break a commandment or not. We are not puppets.
That's right.
If there are other religions, I don't know whether the Jehovah's Witnesses has these other components, but I'm sorry, but Catholicism didn't. And I was like, there's something really wrong here. And that's when the cracking was going on for me. So I'm powerless, and that only we can help you.
That's right. Give yourself to this simple
program.
Yeah, simple program. And when it was called a program, even at 18, I looked at it and I was like, where's the program?
Right.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, why does this step, they kind of sound similar. What do you really mean by that? Which was 6 and 7, right? But I had the same problem because I quit drinking on my own, which you probably know, right?
Yes.
And so when they said I was powerless, I said, well, I can't do the first one because I'm not powerless. I quit on my own. And I think I was kind of a little out there crazy, right? I was willing to call myself crazy to fit in, right? Crazy stuff. But I never could. And they said, well, you can't really. Now, they didn't say this the first 7 months, but once I was there 7 months, they really started. So when you talk about breaking you, and when someone wants to break you, that's a cult. That's a sick, you want to call it any toxic groups, it really horrible, disgusting thing to say to a 18-year-old who quit, who's sober, and was actually felt really good about it. I loved not drinking at that point, and I was on a pink cloud. Then you want to squash me.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to me.
Yeah.
Did it? It was really fucking sick.
Yeah. That we have to break you down to build you back up.
Yeah. That's so twisted. And what's interesting about the first step is it's really remarkable what Bill convinced people of. He literally is saying that a substance, a molecule, acetaldehyde, has a mind.
Right.
And that you don't. I mean,
and that it's hell bent on your destruction.
Yeah. Yeah. That it has a motive.
It's got so much power.
Yes. That it has, you can't have power without having volition, without having a mind. So he's saying you as a human being do not have a mind. So we need to mitigate you. And this is a cult. Okay.
Yeah.
A cult
Yeah.
can't survive with a thinking apparatus present. It can't. You have to follow group think. You have to relinquish your free will to somebody else.
Yep.
Bill was a master at this. He said, no, you don't have power. That was the whole ego deflation at depth model. It was, I got to destroy the people so they're minions. And we have to have a straw man called addiction, which is this nebulous, mindful thing bent on your destruction. That's fucked up.
It's so fucked up. You know, when I met Stephen Slate for the first time in person in New York City, so I was there filming in 2014, and we finally meet, you know, and we were standing there and he was using these new words, and it was called problematic use. Problematic.
Yes.
Like, what, not, why was I so like, I was like, what, wait, what phrase was that? I love that. And that was before everybody else in the world, in culture and politics.
That's right.
The word problematic. It came up first in addiction. And so he said, it's problematic drug and alcohol use. And it's harder to write. It's way longer typing it on the computer or in social media than addiction. But trust me, I never once again typed the word addiction into social media or in any of my blogs. That problematic use. And then my story, right? We could talk of how I tried to fit myself into this story, but that the words are so important. And so that's another sign of a cult, which is called special language.
Yes, that is exactly right.
That's
And
right.
they hijacked so much
Oh,
of our
those fuckers.
language.
Yeah,
I
special
know.
language. They all sit around and go,
Gratitude.
yeah. Oh, he went out. He went out. What is
The
that?
rooms.
He went out. Oh, I'm a retread. I'm a tire retread. It's like, shut the fuck up. Like, even when I was new and young, I was like, why are they calling them pigeons? They called them pigeons.
Oh, we did that. Yeah.
Right? I mean, just go ahead and brainstorm.
Yeah.
What are some of the other ridiculous shit?
Oh, newcomer, like you're a newcomer, you're a newbie. Normies. People are
The whole
normies.
they're normies. Right.
Mhm.
We're a little special, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because we're
I
sober. They're not judgmental, but they, of course, they all think they're better. Why do I know that? Because I actually, at some level,
Yes.
I didn't drink. So I was like, oh, I did not want to be that and didn't think I was that. But when I left and I drank and I imbibed again, right? I imbibed.
Yes.
But it's like, it was like, no.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it was one of the things that happened with my dad when he went to AA in the 70s was like, he initially was forced in there by the court system because he had a DWI, but he had multiple DWIs. And back in the 70s, they pretty much let you go home. Well, in this last DWI, he crashed and they didn't let him go home. They put him in jail. So, and then his boss basically came and visited him at detox. They ended up bringing him to detox and was like, hey, your career is over if you don't stop drinking. Wow. And so he stopped drinking, forced to go to AA. So, but he became this like pompous, arrogant. It's the cliche of the 40-something AA guy. Like, he brought home all these books he made us read, and oh my God. I mean,
you're bringing back bad memories of me trying to get my stepfather, here's the big book of, he wanted to kill me probably, he was like rolling his eyes and his cigarette, get her out of here. Fucking vegetarian for a year. And now she comes back from Hawaii with this AA bullshit. No, it was terrible. I was awful with my proselytizing. It was pretty sad.
I mean, it's a cliche. It really is. Like, you can see it sometimes. TV shows and stuff depict these. I'm like, that's it. That was my dad.
We just did a 2-part series on how AA is a cult. So
on our podcast.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's our most popular podcast series.
Yeah. We went through with this listing. The Cult Awareness Network has an old website.
Yeah.
And they list all of these, like
13 of them,
13 or 14 characteristics of a cult.
Yeah.
How do you like, if you Google, how do I know I'm in a cult? They'll pop up on that first page.
Yeah.
And so we
went through everyone.
We went through everyone and said, does AA apply and how? And it ends up that all the
All of
criteria
them.
fits all the criteria in spades. And I was able to ramble off and she was able to ramble all the ways in which all the sayings, the group think, there's just so much of it. I think that
Your best thinking got you here.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that
Like
I think
what
that
my thinking got me here. And you know what they started to do? This is terrible. I found this out by listening to the girl who, well, not a girl, but she was a teenager. And she became, what's her name? Tina Dupre.
Oh,
Remember her? And she wound up on This American Life, maybe 20. I should put that in the link too.
yeah.
And she said that they were coming to pick them up from foster care. And this is in the 80s, and they were telling them they had alcoholic thinking.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I got really angry about that. I was
Yes.
like, you motherfuckers. There is no such thing as alcoholic thinking.
Nope.
That's
But
right.
man, this got everywhere. This
I
was
know.
everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
Parents saying it is so bad, so bad. So tell me again, your podcast is different than what platform is the podcast on?
It's
It's
on
on-
Spotify and
Oh, it's on
Apple and
Spotify. Okay,
every-
what's it called
Apple
again?
and Amazon.
It's
What's-
the Addiction Solution Podcast.
Okay. I don't know why I missed this. Okay. The Addiction
Solution.
podcast, and you're on Spotify and you're on iTunes.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah,
Everywhere
pretty much
there's podcasts.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere that's podcasts are sold.
Yeah.
I hope you figured out how to monetize this. We all need to make t-shirts and sweatshirts.
I know.
Like I finally said, you know what? I'm done. Like people, whatever, we talk about it later. All right. So you found, let's go back. Any more like of the specific stuff that was so egregious for you personally, or that you saw with other people about the ideology?
Yeah. I think that the fourth step, confessional to,
Oh, yeah.
so you have a bunch of people in AA that supposedly can't think for themselves, right? That's the whole basis.
That's the whole premise.
And then you walk in
That's
and,
right.
and the people that can't think for themselves are now thinking for you, right?
right.
And because you're a plebe and you now need to do basically a group confessional, or at least with one other of these people that have no basis in therapy whatsoever. And you're supposed to tell them all your deep, dark secrets. Now, the reason is for shaming value. Bill realized in the early days of AA, it was at group conscience. I mean, it was literally, you did it with the group in these people's living rooms, and you would admit all this shit to people. Now, you're as sick as your secrets, so tell all.
I know.
Oh my serious issue.
How
with
many
that.
movies is that line in? When I hear some of these lines, you're like, oh, there's a stepper screenwriter, Wow, that's so. And that is an incredible point, Mark. To think about that. First, you're powerless, and that you shouldn't think for yourself. Now, I really pushed back towards that. I was like, stop it. Like, I can think for myself. I made it across the country alone, without you or anyone else,
right?
And I will survive. And know I can think for myself. But that's really bad. And I mean, I had heard when I left Hawaii that they started to do these they were going to go through the steps together. And so I didn't know that this was a predecessor. I thought this was like a new thing that was being done here in California that got brought over there. And you're going to work on your money and your relationships. And we're going to share stuff in small groups in people's living room. And I looked at Harry and I was like, no, I don't think I'm doing that. I said, I already worked the steps and I did a good fifth and I did a couple times and I'm done.
Yeah.
There was a lot of pushback for the people who were very successful in Honolulu, who were standing up and saying, you do it only once, that's it. And you do it privately. And I didn't understand why they were so angry. So there were two factions in Honolulu in the 70s about those that wanted to just boom, boom, boom. And then you go live life. You don't drag it around forever.
What's crazy is I was so indoctrinated, and Big Jer, I call him, and Michelle's father, he was sort of a hybrid. He was indoctrinated, but he was extricating himself.
He was an independent thinker.
Yeah. And so, but here's the crazy part. We were so fucked up and there was no freedom model. There was no other alternative. There was nothing. So we delved back into AA. We became gurus. I became a big book thumper the whole time. And then what happened was, in that process of like 2 to 3 years, I was hanging on to, this is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
And then I started doing the history, and I was like, so I'd be teaching the big book. I go, that ain't true. Oh, Tom, that part, you don't have to do that either.
Yeah,
that,
don't do
that
that.
ain't true. And then eventually I realized the whole fucking thing was Bill Wilson's fantasy.
Mhm.
And then we walked out. So it was really good for me to dive in and try to make AA work. I became a
What-
guru.
Yeah.
You
It
went
makes me ill.
backwards. We actually started a group called Old Fashioned AA.
Oh,
We did. So we went backwards, which is how we know that they used
Yes.
to do all this stuff at group level. But we were like, we don't think
Oh,
we're going to do
wow.
that.
we did surrender prayers.
We
And then,
did
then I was like, this is fucking crazy.
You know what? So my friend had a kid who joined AA, and they were getting a lot of pushback because they read the foreword, which said they were cured, right? It says we
Oh,
were.
yes.
We
Yeah,
were
that's right.
alcoholics.
I remember we
and
did
we
that
were
too.
cured. So we're not going to call ourselves alcoholics anymore in identifying. This was a
Right.
new, like millennials, and they wanted to create these small groups, whatever. But it's good if somebody can crack open any part of the bullshit and
Yes.
say, "Oh, that is so funny."
See,
that
my
we were gonna
dad did
create
that too.
Old-fashioned AA.
We were
Oh my-
Old Fashioned AA. We had a newsletter called The Old News, which made it all over the world.
Yeah.
Wow.
We did. And
Yeah.
my
It's
dad,
embarrassing. It's
it's
hugely
embarrassing. But my dad, even then, though, way back when, one of the things that we forgot to say was when he did this stupid intervention thing with me, like 6 months before I stopped drinking. And what he said to, and I was a psych major in college. And what he said to me is, you're not an alcoholic. There's no such thing. And I
He
go,
was a
well,
forward thinker.
I go, and so this is like 1989, Christmas of 1989. And he said, and I said, what the hell are you even talking about? I go, that means you can drink safely. Like that's what people with the AA mindset think. Like, and
Yeah.
he goes, yeah, I can. And I go, well, then why don't you? And he's like, because I don't want to. And he's like, look, you're drinking a little too much. You're struggling, but you can be okay. Now,
Yeah.
at the time, I was very angry and half in the bag already. So I laughed. I left the intervention for me because it got kind of ugly. My sister was there. It was pretty ugly.
Wow.
And but I never forgot what he said. And so then when I did stop drinking 6 months later, and I asked him, I'm like, so there's no such thing as an alcoholic. And he's like, nope. And he wouldn't call himself one. He did not call himself one.
Oh,
at the
and
meetings.
it caused a shitstorm. In the
Oh,
meetings.
Lord.
Then we said we were recovered, and then AA came after us. Then we had to sue AA, and we were in a lawsuit with them forever. And
Oh yeah, AA, the area newsletter published scandalous stuff about Mark and my father
yeah, they said
in the mid 90s.
They printed our names and our addresses and said that we were responsible for missing children, and the FBI was after us. And then they disseminated it to 14,000 groups. Yeah, it was
crazy.
Our whole lives were destroyed for years.
Yeah, it was
And-
crazy.
And yeah, and then we sued them, but they kept us in court until and right when we were running out of money for the whole lawsuit and everything, the judge was like, oh, I'm going to recuse myself. I'm in AA.
I'm in AA.
And we were like,
Oh my God.
yeah. So
Was good. He recused himself.
but
Wow.
then at that point we were out of money, and so we dropped the lawsuit, and we just had to survive it and take it on the chin. I mean, if you knew the shit we went through,
Oh,
I
my
had
God.
police officers in our first retreat with no warrants threatening us. Thankfully, Jerry was a ballsy dude, because he's like, I'm gonna kick your ass in my house right now if you don't get the fuck out. and I was terrified, But I mean, Gestapo stuff and all of this was coming down from the state of New York, from AA, World Services, and all of it. And it was
AA is at every level here in New York. You know that.
Yeah. So why don't
every
we
level.
have like 15 minutes left before I know you have to go, Mark. It's wow. I'm really sorry that happened. But that Michelle and I, when I was introduced to you from Ilsa Thompson, I think.
Yep.
We did a couple of phone calls. You were very helpful with me with leaving. You told me this horrible story of what happened, because Ilsa wanted me to understand how powerful AA was, and we didn't know whether they would still be like that, but what had happened to you guys.
Yeah, it's
right.
Yeah.
It's not fun. It's
No,
not fun.
so I do think that we can talk about the infiltration. So I know that we had in the 1940s, in the early 40s, they brought it into prison in California. And
Oh,
California
right.
was the most infested. What's his name? Jim Branscombe, who was on the board, told me, you're really barking up a really Goliath and, tree here in California. And I was like, what? And I was like, okay. And then I learned there were governors, that ran on the platform, and mayor of Boston said, I'm a sober alcoholic. And I was like, well, maybe we should all run we're ex-steppers. We got out of AA and I'm helping millions and I'm going to run for office. Like, that's what they did. They ran on,
I know.
I'm an addict, I'm an alcoholic, and so I'm going to make a really good leader. I'm like, wow.
Wow is right. That's the opposite of being a good leader. The only thing that you are if you're an AA is a good follower.
Yeah.
That's the point. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So where else is AA totally infested? And
oh my gosh.
Well, I think Hollywood, I think government, I think the medical community, I think the psychiatric community, novelists, writing papers everywhere. Anybody
that goes, there are questionnaires here in New York where every year I get a physical, and every year I'm given this questionnaire that asks you all of these, how much do in the last 7 days, how many drinks have you had in the last 7 days? Have
what
you?
What the fucking business is it?
Yeah. Do you know what it like if I ever answered it, in the last 7 days or in the last 30 days, have you felt sad more than 3 days? So it's all designed to funnel you into the industry, the treatment industry, the mental health industry, and make you feel broken.
Yeah.
Make you feel broken in some way, because that's how they monetize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really big, right? So it's really infested everywhere. I was really shocked as I left. It was more when I left that I learned how deep. So then people were contacting me from my podcast, and I met up with some people in person. They're like, oh, you should listen to this podcast. These comedians are all talking about, that they're in AA, the comedians, right? So that they're using their jokes on, the stage.
Yep.
Then there's the probation, whatever that. The county of Los Angeles is on this podcast, and she is like she's old enough to know that she shouldn't say it, and she believes in the anonymity. And I'm like, so the fucking head of probation in Los Angeles is a fucking stepper.
Yes.
18, 25. Oh my God. So, it was a lot of that, like the head judge downtown was a fan of AA. I don't know whether he was in it. When I tried to ask them to stop court ordering violent offenders there to AA, you think it's a no-brainer to do that, right?
Yeah, I know. Look it's everywhere. I think that the system it's a money-making system. Ultimately, it's about the $45 billion that's spent on treatment. Bill Wilson figured out that if he could provide, quote unquote, free aftercare, okay, he would have and create this monolith of treatment. And they had this arrangement where you go to rehab, what's on your bed waiting for you? A big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right. Mm. So that's your referral brochure. So they teach you that model, and then you have free aftercare, quote unquote, but it's not free because you pay with your allegiance for a life.
Right.
Okay. But Bill needed bodies. Bill said, I can't make money, because he tried the whole treatment internal thing and it fucking imploded all over the place. And so he said, I don't want the liability of that crazy shit in my model.
Yeah.
So I just want meetings where every single person gets rotated through and puts $1 in the basket. That's the pyramid scheme. If I can get enough people recruited in and through and just recirculate them over. And I've been in professional treatment meetings where they get these managers and CEOs together, and they'll talk about the revolving door policy. They want you to regurgitate through the system and just stay in. And
I've been to addiction conferences where there's whole keynote speakers on that.
Yeah. On how to keep
what
you
the money adds up. The dollars,
does.
And I remember when New York was saying, well, we want you to put $2 in now, like your quarter is not enough. And, things do change, I think, legally once you start asking for money, the way that they did. And that was like in my last 10 years. And so, well, if you have a Starbucks, this is what they were saying, because people were walking in with Starbucks because they were sick of the shitty coffee at some of the meetings.
Right.
Not that, I made the finest coffee at my meetings that I went to and had herbal tea and cookies. But anyway, people started coming in with a Starbucks and they were like, well, you can pay $3.50. Why don't you put $2 in the basket? And people are like, what? Are you kidding me? So if you and those are watching out there, you can go to the site with any nonprofit and look them up, and you can see what those dollars turn into. And they turn into.
I did a total. I took their finances, and I did in our online program in the deprogramming section. I literally made a presentation of all the money, where it goes, who gets it, and what their salaries are, how it's distributed, and the whole model. You can see it. It's super simple. And Bill created a money-making machine, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't do anything.
He's such a lazy guy too. Did you ever take a tour of the stepping stones?
Yes.
You did.
Yes.
You did. What did you?
I did it. He did it.
Because of the film, and even the person taking us on the tour said he was the laziest guy. If he could lay down, he would lay down.
Yeah, he was depressed his whole life.
He was depressed. That poor man.
Oh my God. He was just such a. When did you go, Mark? When did you take your
tour? Oh my God. 94. 94. And then I went to his grave site where they have the little path and there's piles of coins, like a little shrine. I was like, this is fucking weird. This whole thing is
my God, it's so bad. And so then when I was making the film, this lady contacted me who lives across from Stepping Stones because they would have like an event every year. And it's, in a neighborhood, in what town? And she was so furious about it. She hated AA. She hated this place. And they wanted to turn it into a
museum, like the AA museum.
Yeah. Did they ever do that? Did it?
I don't know.
It's not that far from here. Yeah. It's only like an hour and a half from us, maybe from where we are right now.
And then we have Nick Pike's farm here where they used to, Abby Thatcher and all those would get shit. It was just,
what farm? What's the name of this place?
Mick Pike's farm.
Like one of the first rehabs, right?
Yeah, it's where they
sent. What's the place in Connecticut that's famous? White something?
Hold on.
Silver Hills?
No, it's where Steve went.
I thought it was Silver Hills or something.
Steve went there.
Steve did go there. I can't remember.
I laughed when Steve
White something farm, right? It's a beautiful place. Why did these rehabs take over these beautiful retreats that people really need to go to with their family and friends and have a good time?
Oh, I know, right?
We need like the Catskill kind of a place, and some kind of, let's have a reunion of ex-stuppers where you can just all talk. And did you ever go? I was listening to Mark Vicente and he went to a cult, like deprogramming conference.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like, such a thing exists. Somebody in one of the groups is talking about having a meetup somewhere. I was going to do it, but then COVID came. All right, so 5 minutes, and then I know you got to go. Well, can you stay a little longer? Or you want to just end it and we can do something else in the future? Do you have to run off too, Michelle?
I think
I don't, but
why don't we end it and then just do another one?
Yeah, we can.
That sounds really good. So you want to finish up? Anything else you'd like to say about the whole why we think it's the mother cult?
Well, here's the thing. It really, what it did was it mainstreamed the cult in America and in the world. It made it so that, there are people that are actually saying to us online that who cares if it's a cult? If it helps millions of people, who cares if it's a cult? Well, that to me, there's nothing more scary than that because the idea that I need somebody else to run my life, to tell me how to think, tell me what to wear, tell me where to work, tell me who to marry or who I can talk to even. That's frightening to me.
I think that, cults have always existed in one form or another, whether it was the Church of England controlling people, whether it was communism as a macro cult where you were told how to live your life. This is not a new idea. I think that the newness, why it's the mother of all cults in America is because it changed the way we help people. It's in the name of helping. And it changed that forever. You can't just, the way you would help people prior to that was if you had a drinking and drug problem, you'd say, hey, why don't you move on from this problem?
Yeah, well,
it was,
you could stop.
Yeah. and then people did. They did stop, and so it literally created this massive distraction that is designed, and all cults ultimately are about two things: power and money. And money is power.
Yeah.
So it always goes back to that. So if you follow the dollars, it becomes really obvious. And always, I think, so I think it changed the way people were helped. And that's the great ugliness of it, because it's in the name of we're helping you, you know. And
yeah, you both, so we can end it on this, because those are two really big truths that I didn't come up with myself. So mainstreaming it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They mainstreamed it. And
They
can
did.
talk about the next time, Marty Mann, of exactly how, because I do know a lot about how by reading her biography and other things. And maybe
Yes.
the second one, we could get specific, and I can talk about the people in Hollywood that she connected with and how she used her marketing and PR skills. So I want to thank you both. This is Mark Sheeren here with me and Michelle Dunbar. We
Thanks
didn't have
so much,
Stephen,
Monica.
I'll get Stephen on alone. They wrote the Freedom Model with Stephen Slade, and they have the Freedom Model, a program that's an online program. You have your podcasts that are on Spotify,
Yep.
and on iTunes, wherever podcasts are sold, or I mean, are
distributed, streamed,
distributed. And then there was also I wanted to say the name of the Addiction Solution podcast.
Addiction Solution.
And then you also have a Facebook group, and you have a TikTok.
Yeah, we
That's
do.
Right. Yeah, Instagram, all that stuff.
We're everywhere now.
All right, I'm everywhere but TikTok, but it's okay. I'm going to focus on this YouTube thing now. I think it's the right place. Thank you so much, guys. It's great to see you both.
Thank you, Monica. It's good to see you.
Happy holidays, and in the
Same
new
to
year
you.
we'll do a part 2.
All right,
Yes,
sounds
sounds
good.
good.
All right, everybody, take care.
All right.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye. Bye. Bye, everybody. So we ended that one, and it was really exciting to start this new podcast that I'm doing. And if you would like, please subscribe, as we're trying to get the subscribers up to 1,000. Share everywhere. And if you have an idea of somebody that you would like to have on the show, you can hit me up at makeaasafer@gmail.com, or you can just hit me. I do read all the comments. And thank you, everybody. It was great talking to Mark and to Michelle. Take care. Bye-bye.